Hi, this is John. Welcome to American Enlightenment. Ladies, first off, I'd like to thank you for coming down here and taking time out of your day, right? And a lot of people, I know they're nervous on camera. This is you guys' first time. So I'll ask some questions. I've got 25 plus questions here set up. What made you decide to become a 911 dispatcher, and what kept you in the job? I mean, what got you in the groove of doing it? We'll start with you.
I went with a friend to St. Martin's College looking for a part-time job. He was looking for a part-time job. He sees the dispatcher's position. He and I go down to the Olympia Police Department, pick up the application, but then he realizes it's 38 hours a week, so not quite full-time. They didn't have to pay benefits. He said, I can't work 38 hours a week and go to school. He called them and they said, hey, who is that girl with you? Would she like a job? And that's how I got the job.
And the adventure begins.
Yes.
Okay. If it's okay, what time frame was that?
It was 1974.
Ooh, interesting period of American history.
Yes.
Okay. And then how
So,
this all start?
so for me, I was a real estate agent, and I had just gone through a divorce. Lived in basically Mill Creek, Washington, with the boys. So I took the three boys and we moved to Ocean Shores because I just wanted to get away and I wanted to live by the ocean. And I found out that you couldn't really make a living on selling real estate there because it was mostly vacant lots. So I was looking for another job, and a dispatch position opened up at Ocean Shores Police Department. So I decided to go apply, and I got hired, and it was part-time, turned into full-time, and I loved it. And 34 years later, I retired from that job.
Okay, so what time frame was that when you?
So I was hired in Ocean Shores in 1985.
Okay, that's another interesting period. That's the Reagan years, I do believe. Okay, and 74 would have been Gerald Ford, right after Nixon. Okay, so roughly you guys are about 9 years apart in starting careers.
Correct.
Okay, okay, you said you loved it. What kept you in the job?
So working in Ocean Shores Police Department, we were housed with the fire department in the medical units too. So we were all like one big family, and we would only get busy on the weekends because Ocean Shores only had a population of 3,500 back then. Probably still has about that, but our weekend populations would go up to 25,000 in the summer. So it could be boring when you're working graveyard shift, but it was just always different every day when you went in. So that's what I liked about it. So we dispatched for police, fire, and medical, and it was just always different. There was never the same, and that's what I liked about it.
Okay, and then what kept you in it? I mean, you got into this. You go with somebody else, they're going to get the job.
Right.
And next thing, hey, what about that gal that was, and next thing
I'm filling out an application, and they basically hired me for my penmanship. I didn't have an interview. They said, why don't you come down and sit in the center? The center wasn't even as big as this room.
Okay.
It was just a desk, and there were three gentlemen, and two of them were disabled. And the third man I couldn't see, so I wasn't even sure if he wasn't disabled. And it was such a bizarre, I was young, very naive, but I was intrigued that they were answering calls and talking to the police on the radio. And I said, okay, thank you, this was fun. And they said, oh, well, you can start Tuesday. And I was, oh, okay. And it was really I think it was the third job I'd ever had.
Okay. I just have to ask this. What was the first day on the job like?
It was there was no training. It was just watch and learn. And that's all I did.
They just rolled you in there. I mean, it's just kind of like, like here's a chair, here's a tablet, here's a.
Here's a typewriter. And we're going to give you the calls. They were all written on paper. And then after we want you to do a kind of a catalog of the day's events. So as the police officers came in for the next shift, they would read what has happened. And it was called the rollover.
Yeah.
So for all you folks out there who don't know what a typewriter is, and a lot of people will, some people won't. Before the age of computers, you actually had to press a key, and a little thing would come up and strike a piece of paper and a roller, and make sentences and words. And there was this stuff called whiteout when you made a mistake. I was a big fan of that too. So you had IBM Selectric.
Yes.
That was the advanced little ball. You remember it used to go bruh, 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 like that kind of thing. Yeah, that's state of the art.
Yes.
1974. What was your first day like?
It was because it was a small department. I had one person that I sat with, and I think I observed for maybe 3 or 4 days at the most before I was set on my own. And my very first call that I got, it was a plane crash that somebody had crashed into the bay, and it was super busy for just one person. And that was probably my first or second day by myself. And my supervisor was monitoring the radio. She was listening, and so she came running in to help. But I managed it by myself. It was the first real tragedy I ever had. It was a sad story. It was a 21-year-old, I think. It was his birthday. He was on his first solo flight from Hoquiam and missed the runway. And so he crashed into the bay. But yeah, so it wasn't a lot of training. So it was kind of hands-on. We did the same thing. I used to type out all the calls that happened for the day, and the local paper would come in and pick it up so they could report what was going on in town.
It's very curious. So you guys shared information with the media.
Yes.
Wow.
I gave the weather report in Ocean Shores and how we would test the wind. Like Como would call in or somebody, and they'd say, what direction is the wind blowing? And I would look out the window and I'd say to look at the flag, and I go, oh, it's coming out from the southwest, about 20 miles an hour. So it was all guessing back then. I mean, there was no.
That's so quaint. Yeah, have you ever seen that movie Overboard with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn? Remember they had the Coos Bay or Elk Cove,
Right,
Elk Cove.
yeah.
The reporter, it kind of sounds
Yeah.
small town,
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
But the gal that's actually interviewing people, runs the deli.
Yeah. We'd make a joke. We'd just go, there it is. That's how the wind's blowing, So, but it literally used the flag.
So what were you, similar experiences like that, or?
Very similar. Every morning around 4 o'clock, KGY, the radio station, Dick Poost, who was with them forever, would come into our department, and he could read the rollover. And we would give him stories. Later as life, he would call in, but a lot of times he just liked that ability to stop in and make facial contact and visit with everyone and get the news. And Como would call, and Cairo would call. If it was a big story, you might get a phone call from the AP.
Okay.
But you couldn't give out a lot of information.
Yeah, I mean,
you had to convince a sergeant or a lieutenant with a PD to call them, which was challenging.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long did you guys work as dispatchers, and what changes do you see over the years?
Well, when I started, you had to write everything down. And you had a little piece of paper, and you could circle something. You could circle it was a male, or it was a female, or she had brown hair. And then you had to write a little narrative. But you had to hurry because now you had to pass that on to the dispatcher so he or she could dispatch that information over the radio. And if it was a medical call, then you had to duplicate it. You'd tear it and you'd hand one to the police dispatcher and one to the fire dispatcher.
So everything's on paper.
Everything was on paper.
Did you find that as efficient as when it went to computers?
Oh, it's so much more efficient with a computer.
Okay, so it changed.
Oh, 100%. And when we moved from one center to another, we found a bunch of paper on the floor of calls that were never dispatched because they fell to the floor and no one picked them up.
Fascinating. The same question. How long did you work at this venture? What changes do you see? Because so now we're talking 74. Now we're talking 80, 85, correct?
85, yeah.
Yeah.
85 to 90 at Ocean Shores, and then I transferred laterally to Thurston County in 1990. So total years 34 between the two. And again, the technology that changed was huge. I mean, we used, back in there, we used from paper to computers, to computer-aided dispatch, which really helped us funnel the calls to the right, either a medical or a law enforcement or fire. The GPS changed. I mean, we used map books. So if we wanted to send the fire department somewhere, we would get out our map book and go through it real quick, find the grid number and the page number to give that to the fire department, who also used map books. So then they would look at that. Right. So, GPS technology changed everything. Caller ID changed everything.
What year did you see GPS technology come in? 90?
I believe it was in the late 80s or early 90s.
And then same thing for you as well?
Yeah, because we were at the same place then.
Okay, so 90, okay, so 89, 90, you leave Ocean Shores, right?
In 90,
Yeah, a smaller town.
Well, that's the first time I had a computer, was when I moved here. We didn't have computers in Ocean Shores, so I had to learn how to use those.
At that point in time, I was just saw computers on TV, and that was about it. So
yeah, so that was a big learning curve for me because I'd done everything on paper for 5 years. So,
and we still had paper when you came.
Yeah, there were some paper. Yeah, and the maps were still there. So I don't think it was probably till actually the mid 90s or maybe even more before GPS came in. I can't remember exactly what year.
But once a center got larger and we were still working on paper, it's almost as if you needed a runner.
We did have a runner
to deliver all these calls because you had a county dispatcher and a city dispatcher and a fire dispatcher. So it was.
And our computers would go down and we would have to go to paper and we would have to run them around the room to the right. The right. It doesn't happen anymore.
It's the same thing now. I mean, I would imagine. I mean, if you had, what's so funny is we're so dependent on computers and computer technology that if you had what's called EMF burst, it's you're exploding a nuclear device, and it creates a burst of radiation, and it'll fry out electronics. Cars would stop running. Watches, anything electrical just fry. Computers as well. So we're very dependent. So they got paper there, right, on hand in case something.
Oh yeah, we have cards for that. Yeah.
It's wild. It always falls back to simple. Mm-hmm. So GPS, when it kicked into gear, did it make the job easier, or was it a learning curve kind of thing? Because now you're not dealing with. I know exactly what book you're talking about. They used to give me a headache, like trying to find somebody's address when you're whipping through, and if they changed a country road or they added a road, yeah, you're lost.
Well, and you were actually relying on the phone book. I don't even think they have phone books anymore.
No.
If you were looking for someone's address, you actually get out the phone book.
Yeah.
And we had another book. What was it? It was a reverse directory.
Oh, reverse directory.
Oh, I haven't heard that term in forever.
Yeah, for phone numbers. Yeah.
You could look up somebody's name or their phone number, and it would tell you quite a bit of information.
Well, now our telephone system does it for us.
Back then, it might even say where they worked, who their spouse was. So it was a good tool if you were looking for a bad guy. He's in the reverse directory. Who knew?
Everybody's information is somewhere.
Yeah.
Even back in those
Even
days.
back then.
Yeah. And if you really want to know something about somebody, just contact the Church of Latter-day Saints in Utah. You can find out anything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
They keep immaculate records on every person in the United States. So a lot of people don't know that they do. What was the most challenging thing about the job? Okay, so technology is morphing, right? And you're handling life or death sometimes, right? Some calls, I mean, there could be, children, elderly person. I mean, I can't imagine it must be nerve wracking. What was the first call like? I mean, she had a plane crash. I'd imagine that would got the adrenaline going. Yeah, I mean, you can't one up that for a first time experience. Yeah, what was your first dramatic call? A plane crash. Okay, wow. What was yours like? I mean,
One of my, and it wasn't my call, but someone in the center took the call. A parent had shot their child.
what?
Shot their child
On purpose?
on purpose.
Wow.
So they dispatch an ambulance, and at that time it was private. That ambulance was going so fast it burned up on the way. Had to send a second ambulance. I mean, it was just chaos, and the child was dead, but the urgency was to get there.
That's a primal instinct with, I would say, most people, a parent, mother, your instinct kicks into gear. And, a lot of firefighters and first responders, their parents. And to hear a child in jeopardy, that's instinctual to,
How, yeah, yeah. I remember that one.
that how do you deal with that kind of, is there, because I know that for me, I thought it was made of steel until I handled a child's murder. And I have to be kind of delicate about how I describe it. It gave me PTSD, and I have it to this day. Do you deal with PTSD at all, or do you deal with lingering memories that sometimes I would be in the bathroom in the mornings, the first 5-10 minutes, I'm like brushing my teeth, and all of a sudden, just wham, I'm back at the scene.
Well, I haven't thought about that call in a very long time, but just talking among us today, that memory did come back. But there's so many calls. But it was our part to help in that short period of time. And then in my case, I need to let that go because there's another call coming and I need to be on my game.
Okay, and then
I mean, what's was challenging was the shift work was challenging. I was a single mom with 3 boys, so it was hard not to be able to go to their games or um, holidays, birthdays, just planning around all that. I mean, that became a challenge. Um, and I think that, less than 1% of the population can actually do this job, which doesn't mean we're special in any way. It means that we're capable of being able to let go and move on. And I was a training supervisor for, excuse me, the last 15 years. And I couldn't stress enough to the new people that were coming into that business is that it's not your emergency, it's theirs. And you have to be able to literally hang up from somebody that, you just help somebody go through CPR to try and save their life, to hang up, to go on to the next one where somebody's calling about a barking dog. So you go from highs to low very quickly, all the time. And that's just a quality either you possess or you don't. So you can't teach that. So, 911 dispatchers aren't cold people, they're actually very empathetic and warm, but they have the ability to let go of a situation and not hold on to it. You literally have to go home every day and be able to leave that job at the door and not look at it. I've had some calls that I took home with me a little bit and they bothered me, but then I could get over them pretty quickly, and until somebody brought them up again. But you just have that ability to let go very quickly and just move on and try not to hold on to it, because we have a high turnover of people that aren't able to do that. And so it eats at them, so it's very hard for them to deal with emotional people all the time. Because literally you're going through, I've been on a graveyard shift at It was boring, nothing going on. And one night I was sitting there, my feet were up on the desk. I was reading my book. I hadn't had a call in hours. 911 line rings. It's on my console. I go, 911, what are you reporting? And it's like, I just shot my wife. What? You literally move on that quick from doing nothing to just being in a high tense situation. So, but you have to be able to deal with it at the moment, because that's what you're there for. That's your job, is to help these people who are having emergencies.
When that call came through, like the spouse, killing another spouse or injuring another spouse, did you find your adrenaline kicking into gear and your...
Oh yeah, immediately. Like I said, I went from reading a book at 4:00 in the morning to having no calls for hours to this call of, I just shot my wife. I said 911. That's the first thing out of his mouth. And I'm like, what? And so, yeah, I jump up and immediately, and I was working medical fire, so I dispatched it and took the call at the same time. So you have to be able to do both. So it's a very high multitasking job. So yeah, your emotions go very quickly. And some nights you go home and you're exhausted, you're drained, but you know how to deal with it. You just...
Did you find, and I'm going to ask both of you this question individually, that as the years go by, months go by, and you're hearing, like, I just shot my wife, I just shot my child, I've had enough of my neighbor, I just blew his face off, you're hearing these scenarios. Or the other phenomena in America that happened about 2 years ago, people knocking on the wrong door and somebody shooting a young man. Or they pulled into my driveway and it cracked off a couple of rounds in him, right? Did you find that it became easier as you heard, like, from the initial, like for me, I remember the first time going to a scene. It was an incredibly violent scene where a guy was killed. And the second time I went in, I was like looking around like, yeah, there's liminal fingerprint dust everywhere. And, and it's almost like a police dog. And where the dog's at home, it's playing with the family, with the officer and his family. It's relaxed. But when it's on duty, it's like ready to go. And you find that once you got in that chair, that all of a sudden, like, the second to second the phone can ring, it could be another, instance, like, I just stabbed my wife, or I just did this, or I did that, or, some kind of crazy statement pops out of thin air.
Oh, absolutely. Um, I think it's as Cathy described it. One minute you're taking what somebody feels is a huge emergency, a barking dog. That's their emergency. But this person over calling, they have a true emergency. But they both deserve to be treated with a level of respect, and they deserve to have your attention and your reassurance that you're going to do something. But sometimes you hang up and you think, really?
That's just being human.
Yeah.
But it's funny, and it strikes me that there's an air of like utter professionalism. You said you had to treat them with dignity, no matter the level of severity, and then have the emotional release after the call's done.
And I think that's where coworkers come in to play. You really, there's a siege mentality among dispatchers. You might not like the person you're sitting next to. You probably wouldn't do anything with them after work. But when it hits the fan, that's your best friend, because you know he or she has your back, and they're going to do anything to help you be successful with the call that you're on. So it's a strange environment, dispatchers.
Wow.
We're all kind of type A personalities.
Yes.
So because of that, we butt heads a lot.
So
we're all control freaks to somewhat.
Not to sound as a chauvinist or sexist statement, was it mainly just women?
No.
Or was it a mix?
There was a
More
mix.
women.
There was
men,
more women.
But there were men in
There-
there.
yeah.
Boys, guys.
Did you find the men difficult to deal?
Sometimes.
You know, for me, what was the most difficult was when I first started, everyone could smoke.
Oh, that was such classic. And just for the viewing audience out there, once upon a time, you could be on an airline and people would be smoking. It was considered like it was like a healthy thing to be doing. You could be in a restaurant and the booth, like literally 5 feet away from you. Everybody, mom and dad is puffing up, and the kids are just sitting there, and there's secondhand smoke just lofting all over the food and going everywhere.
We could smoke at dispatch when I at Ocean Shores. Now at Thurston County, we could smoke in the break room.
When I started, you could
But you
smoke.
could in yours.
And so anytime there was a stressful call, there was a term, light them up, because everybody lit a cigarette because
That
they
was a
knew this
stress
was,
relief.
yeah, unless you were a non-smoker. And then you were like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, secondhand smokes. So as years, that's fascinating to hear. As years are transitioning, when did they, say no more nicotine at work, unless it's outside and away from the building in the 90s?
It was in the 90s. I'd say like 94, 95 we transitioned.
Yeah, I think government, county buildings, they no
Yeah.
more smoking, and that's when it changed.
I don't think I was too popular with either one of you, huh?
I didn't smoke.
You didn't smoke. I did at that
Oh,
time.
okay.
I don't smoke anymore, but I did at the time.
Well, actually, you probably did smoke. You just, well, yeah, secondhand.
exactly.
You were smoking, trust me. You just didn't realize it. Yeah, you just didn't realize at that time. Did you have some kind of a ritual, like for me, it's chocolate chip cookies.
Oh,
Yeah, or you have like something you would grab a piece of chocolate or just like something to decompress.
it was all about the sugar.
Sugar. She's
Yeah.
sugar girl.
Yeah, it's all about the sugar. And law enforcement, if they're your friend, and they usually are, they bring you treats. So typically, dispatchers, it's a sedentary job, and pretty soon you're packing on the
ice cream.
pounds because that's your stress release.
Well, there's more meets the eye to that with high stress. You have cortisol release with high stress, and that'll cause problems with hormonal situations and cause weight gain. Also cause a lot of other things. Predisposition for probably diabetes, things like that, heart disease. You keep releasing that nitrous into that that V8 engine. It's pretty soon that motor's no good anymore. That's your heart. So, well, let's go back to my pre-done questions here. What about a call that had a lasting impact? I mean, it just kind of it sticks with you. For me personally, there's one story in particular for me, and I was never a 911. I did crime scene cleanup for 20 plus years.
I like the calls that had a little bit of humor to them. And I did not take this call, but a friend of mine did. She was delivering a baby over the phone, and it was obvious the baby was going to arrive before the paramedics, and she did. And so she was talking to the parents, and she said, "What is the baby's color?" She was looking for, is the baby starting to pink up, or is she on the blue side, because she hadn't heard the baby cry. But the parents, what they heard was, "Oh, what color is the baby? Oh, she's half black, half Italian." And we thought that was so cute.
I'm just curious, that story have a positive outcome?
Absolutely. Because
Cool.
then the baby started to cry, and then of course the parents said, "Oh no, she's pink. But she is half Italian, half black." We're like, okay.
That's
cute. And a lasting impact story?
I mean, the one that I think of that impacted me the most that I'll never forget is, and it's a sad one, but I had a dad called in, and he had found his son, 17-year-old son, on the ground with face down, and he saw a shotgun next to him. And he's just going, "Oh my God, what have you done?" And I'm just trying to talk to him because I had 3 boys, and two of them were in high school still. And so this dad is just like, why? And then he said, here's a note. And then I said, okay, can you turn him over? Because we can start CPR, because we didn't know how long it had been and where he'd shot himself. And when he turned him over, he shot himself in the face. So I said, honey, can you cover him up? Because he goes, oh my God, my wife's going to be home any minute. Well, meanwhile, the fire department's on their way. And I'm just trying to talk to this dad and, just trying to keep him from breaking down, because he's really worried about his wife, who just got off work, was going to be home any minute. And then the fire department had arrived exactly at the same time she did. And I will never forget her scream when she walked to the door, because he hadn't had time to cover him up yet. So that was very sad. And, what's even sadder is we used to be in a building with the coroner. So we sometimes would have to walk by, because we were at the bottom of the courthouse originally before we moved. And there would be dead bodies in the hallway sometimes that we'd have to go around. And once in a while, the coroner might drop a body and call us if anybody was interested in helping pick it up. It was truly the morgue where we walked by.
I have to jump on a last statement. They would call you and ask you.
Well, one time, this is one that sticks out, is it was a female that had gone to pick up a body, somebody that had passed, and we all came in the same door, so we had to walk past their office to go to our door to get in. It was basically the basement of the jail, where the jail was. And she had the body had rolled over on the gurney under the ground, and she couldn't get him back. It was a big guy, I guess. So she calls up to dispatch to see if there's anybody that could possibly come down and help her get back. Well, we did have one guy there who absolutely loved that kind of stuff, so he did go down and help her get back on the body. But yeah. Anyway, the two sisters showed up that night when I was leaving work, of the boy the brother that had shot himself. And it was just really heartbreaking. So I remembered that call forever because of my boys and how sad that was. And I did find out a little information about him afterwards, because we had a friend that knew the family. And he was just a kid that was overweight in high school, didn't really have many friends, spent his time in his room alone on the computer. And he just didn't see a reason to live. So, and that was very sad to me.
Absolutely.
But we got a lot of funny ones too. So,
do you feel that if we had invested more in our mental health care system, we downsized the mental health care system in the 80s during the Reagan administration? Did you guys see more of a dramatic turn in suicides and violence to other people after that time period?
I think so. When I started, if there was a call of an intoxicated person on the street, a police officer would actually pick them up and take them. If they didn't take them home, they would take them to a facility. And it was on the west side of Olympia. It was called Seven Gables. And people would, as time went on, would call maybe about a homeless person who was just lying on the grass. And that was a big deal, that somebody was conscious, but just maybe intoxicated or on drugs. But over the years, that became a non-call.
Yeah.
You didn't respond. Police no longer went because there were so many. But we always felt, well, somebody should do something.
Yeah. The suicide and the mental health thing has been such a struggle for law enforcement for years. About, we responded to them for a while, then we didn't respond to them anymore, because it's not a crime to kill yourself. I mean, there was nothing out there to send these people to. There was no place to take them, and and unfortunately, everybody in the world thinks that 911 has all the answers to every problem in the world. And we usually can guide you the right way, but we don't have all the answers, and there's nothing we can do. I mean, suicide calls are the hardest calls, I think, that we take, besides domestics, just depending on the severity of the domestic. But suicide calls are difficult, because people are either calling you to say they want to kill themselves, and you know that they're really reaching out for help, so you want to get somebody there for them, or they're calling saying, don't send anybody, I don't want my family to find me. So and then you hear, they put the phone down, you hear a gunshot. So, those are difficult because you have no control over those types of calls. That's the mental health part of what we deal with.
I'd like to make a statement. Between the two of you, from 74 to 85, the start times, between the two of you, you have seen massive changes in America from different approaches we've taken towards drug addiction, mental health, and the impact it's had on our societies. Because when the tea kettle is whistling, there's my metaphor, okay? And people are in serious trouble, like it's 911. It's called, right? Somebody needs to take it off the hot. It's boiling over. So you've seen massive changes from 74 to 85, and then 85 to like 2000, and now we're in a stage. Toby and the crew goes out and interviews homeless people. We do street interviews. The reason why we're doing these street interviews is because I like to dissect and figure out what got us to the point we are. Okay. And just like with the Maha movement now about like food, right? Why are some Americans living less than they did from the generation before? Why are children overweight in record numbers? Why is diabetes in children? But a lot of people don't pay attention to cause and effect. We really do, and it's not a socialist thing. I like to point out, but having mental health care and having some way to have people like stop the to get them off a train of thought. I think that probably there'd be a lot less suicides. You're never going to get rid of all of them, but possibly violent crimes as well. Okay, and if you disagree with me, just jump right on in. But we downsized everything, and I think that Reagan administration got sold on the fact that you can give somebody a bottle of pills and they can go home and they're just going to go take these pills that I didn't believe at that time was Prozac. And now America has morphed into shootings at malls, shootings at restaurants. And you folks are the ones having to hear this. Have either one of you ever handled a mass shooting call? You don't have to be specific.
We did the Thurston County School, North Thurston, with that mass shooting.
And we had one at a business.
Yeah, which one was that?
It was the cider business.
Oh, right.
The person that did this, anybody look into, I mean, they're like mentally ill, or they have to be mentally ill in order to get that to a point. I'm going to come to my employment, or I'm just going to go a random place and just shoot strangers.
Well, the one I'm thinking of, it was a domestic partner.
Okay.
So he was looking for his domestic partner, but he also shot several other people in the process.
Yeah.
And there was that one in Yale where it was in a clinic and they went in and shot the doctor and some staff.
I did the cleanup.
Oh, did you?
And that was my first chiropractor when I moved to Yelm, Washington, and I know that was one of the 3 scenes in 1 week that gave me PTSD. Yeah. And one was a child's murder. It was all in 1 week. Yeah. And I handled another set of situation happened in Mukilteo, Washington. It made international news. We handled that as well. And yeah, that stuck with me for a long time.
I think what I've seen an uptick in more than anything in the last 10 years before I retired, actually the last 5 years before I retired, was military suicides.
We've touched bases on that. I'd love
veteran. The current, they were like either domestic shootings with, shot the wife, then shot himself, or just them coming home and finding their husband had shot himself, or killed himself some other reason, but it just seemed like it was a lot of military people in the last 5 years prior to me. So I'd say I retired in 19, so like from 15 to 19, I saw a huge uptick in veterans and military.
We, as scientifically analyzing, say after the Second World War, or after the Korean conflict, or after Vietnam, what's changing? Because I mean, the Second World War, I mean, was horrific. Korea was like off the rails, and Vietnam was horrific. It was jungle warfare, and guerrilla warfare, because didn't know who was a bad guy and who was a good guy. And we get our veterans back, and we don't do anything with them. We don't decompress them. We don't hey, I've got a veteran that works for me right now, and he said in his interview that he can only keep a job for 1 year at a time. He's actually broken 1 year. But I don't put a lot of stress on him, because I can see the barometer, kind of like the tea kettle, and I give him what is gonna work. Other than that, then we delegate to somebody else, and then when he's feeling up to it, then he handles it, and there's no stress on him like that. A lot of employers wouldn't know how to handle something like that, and I wish there was some type of education out there to educate employers how to deal with a veteran employee. Are they going to do stress? Just to kind of diffuse the situation, or talk to them, right? Because they're holding stuff in. And I think a lot of times when people commit suicide, they're holding stuff in, and then all of a sudden they just one day, I just can't do this anymore, and it's spur of the moment. I mean, did you find that in some of that, what I'm talking about in the 911 calls, where relatives are saying he was perfectly fine last night and we don't?
But usually they have other issues like bipolar, or there's usually issues when family members are calling like that, or they do have PTSD from their military past or something else, but usually that's associated with other stuff, is what we've seen.
One of the biggest things I found was people are jumping off one medication and trying and switching, and they went off the rails. Or I would get to a scene and there was antidepressants and a bottle of vodka, and they're mixing the two. Well, that we could talk about my experiences. I don't think there's enough time in the day. The emotional toll. I mean, we kind of delved into that a little bit. I mean, and when did you retire? What is it?
2010.
2010. So you had from 74 to 2010. Wow, that's a long haul. And then for you,
From 85 to 2019.
Okay, so you've seen more of the transition.
Right. Yeah.
So you jumped out right before all the fun happened with COVID.
Exactly. Yeah. And COVID hit the next 2 months after my retirement,
I bet you.
and I was locked down.
Yeah, the COVID was so much fun. Do you find triggers, like you're going through your daily activities, and all of a sudden memories just pop back, or you hear a story on the news about a child and it just things just flood back?
I don't want to sound like I don't have empathy, but no, I feel lucky that I had a good career, a long career. I have good health. I have a lovely family. They have their quirks too, but I feel really lucky. And I didn't create those emergencies. If I was able to help along the way, I'm happy for it, but I just moved on. The last day I worked, I got off at 3 a.m, and around midnight, we had a shooting, and it was a law enforcement officer's wife who shot herself with his duty weapon. And everyone was so involved that when my shift ended, I just literally walked out the door and, yeah, and I never went back.
What year was that?
2010.
Sounds familiar.
Okay.
And then for you?
I mean, I'm with Joan. I mean, like I said, I don't want to sound not empathetic, but I didn't hold on to anything. You know, when I left, nothing triggers. I don't get triggers of anything. Um, I'll compare stories I hear on the news. I'm like, oh yeah, we had one of those, or oh, I remembered this call. You know, things will remind me of a call. But as far as doing any triggers, you know, that I get anxiety over, I really don't. Again, I'm like Joan. When I left, I walked out the door and never looked back. So, you know, and I keep in touch with people that are still there, you know, a little bit, but I've never gone back to the center except for maybe one retirement or another. But you know, when you leave that world, you leave it. And it's just like I tell people every day: when you go home from that job, leave it at the door. Don't take it home to your family. Don't take it home, because it will eat you alive if you do. So, I think that that's a trained thing that we do internally. Is we learn to let go of these tragic calls that we take, because truly, and this is just applies to where I've worked, but out of all the calls we take, maybe 3% are actual true emergencies. The other 97% are not.
Stuff like, you know, my neighbor, you know, is, you know, throwing his rake up in the air and that kind of thing. And
you know, or you know,
That's
my neighbors are, you know, they're cutting my trees, or you know, just silly calls that are civil that we can't do anything about, and we don't even send the officers to a lot of the civil calls. We'll just tell them, you know, go get a restraining order, go to the courthouse, you know. So we usually have an answer for them, because we can't send the cops to every call that people call about. So we have, you know, different priorities for calls that are important and which ones are just civil, and the officers can't do anything either. So we're not going to waste their time.
what was the most advantageous technology change that you saw in the dispatch system? What was the thing was like you were like actually like, wow, this is impressive?
GPS.
Just the computers alone,
Yeah.
not having
Okay.
to write everything down. Yeah.
And the locations.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. No map.
Yeah, if you weren't good at giving directions, oh, you were in trouble.
Okay, there's a little store on the corner,
Yeah.
and especially when you got to Rochester, when you didn't have GPS and you're trying to give directions out on these farm roads and stuff, because people would always say, I don't know the address, but it's that second house down the road past that big barn, you know. That's the kind of calls we would have to give out to the officers to find. So GPS was definitely a game changer, and the computers.
And then I remember with cell phones, for the longest time, people would do 911 on a cell phone, and they're like, I'm having a heart attack, and then they would just, you know, pass out. And then there was a big thing about the Civil Liberties Union didn't want people, law enforcement, to know GPS because of invasion of privacy. Or do you remember that whole?
But it didn't apply to 911. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I remember when that came into being, it was actually debated in the legislature if it would be legal or not, which I thought was ludicrous. I mean, if you're on a landline, I mean, it's like, hello, I'm calling for help. That's the reason why I'm on the phone in the first place. So,
Learn little tricks. I mean, we've had calls where people are out in the middle of nowhere. They have no idea where they're at. And one call comes to mind. They were having some kind of medical emergency, and I think they were out on Case Road somewhere. And I think the husband was having a heart attack or something. She'd pulled over, and I was trying to send the medics. They didn't know where they were. And I think they'd run out of gas. I mean, they had some mechanical on top. It was just like all this big crisis. And we were trying to find them. And so they weren't from here. They'd gotten off the freeway someplace off I-5, and they were coming from Portland. And so we just had to find all kinds of tricks to try and get them, you know, we'd have them be honking their horn, and, you know, we just have all these little things that we did. And the medics eventually found them. We just had them lay on their horn because they remembered where they got off. So we'd use the map and just try and locate them. But it can be challenging sometimes.
imagine so. Um, have any funny behind the scenes stories at 911? I mean, you know.
We have lots.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's start there.
Well, some of the fun things we used to do to rookie cops when they would come, and now this is back in the day, so you have to remember that this would never be allowed today, but we used to send the rookie cops to a barking dog complaint at animal control. That would be one of their calls. It was
Did the rookie cops even know that they're being hazed?
no, not until afterwards. And then we'd send them to a loud music complaint at the radio stations,
At a radio station?
I mean, we had little fun things we did back then, but I think one of the funniest calls that I did actually was with an officer was I was working city radio, which was super busy on a Saturday night, and we also had to answer 911 calls because back in those days we didn't have call receivers like we do now. That's all they do is answer calls. We did both, and I was working city radio, and I had this drunk German lady on the line, and she's like, husband, and they're arguing and they're both drunk, and I have to keep them on the line till law enforcement arrives. So I kept saying to her, okay, I'm working the radio. If I'm not talking to you, that means that I'm on the air. And she was just babbling in my ear. I was ignoring her. And then because they stay in your ear because you have headphones on. So I'm listening out of the speaker to the cops. Well, one of the cops was kind of being a jerk. And so I kind of under my breath just went, asshole. And she goes, I know, he's been an asshole for the last 35 years. I'm like, oh my God, I wasn't talking to you. And I am praying that they make no arrests, because anytime an arrest made in a domestic, they pull the actual call. Thank God it was only verbal, so they didn't pull a call, and the cops went to the scene and separated them for the night and let them go. But yeah, that was one of my funny ones. I'm like, oh my God, if this goes to court and I have to stand there and defend, what I was really saying, because I was really talking to the radio, not them. So that was one of my funny ones.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
It's a good one.
My husband was also in law enforcement. So occasionally we would work the same shift. And I remember one day he was responding to a suicidal subject who had a gun, and he was walking towards St. Peter's.
Okay.
And on Lily Road. And they decided that they were only going to let him get so far. And he shoots himself. And my husband comes over the air, or he might have called me on the phone, I'm not sure. And he said, I need a ladder. And I said, okay. But later I thought, what would you need a ladder for? You've got a dead guy. We get home that night, and I said, what was the ladder all about? And he said, he shot himself, and a piece of the brain went up on the streetlight.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, here comes a crow. And the crow took a large piece of the brain.
Yep.
And he said, so I need a ladder. Get up there and get that. I had no idea. We
had one guy committed suicide in between two houses. And it was two insurance claims at the same time. And there were brains in the gutter. And we had a couple of one-liner shots on that one. I'm not going to go into detail.
It's amazing how far
you have to detach yourself.
Yeah. We have very dark humor, and law enforcement and dispatchers as well. Yeah. Even on the plane crash I took initially, because I was brand new, the cops and the firefighters were all laughing about it in the other room, and I was devastated. I mean, I was so mad. I'm like, how can they joke about this? I mean, I literally was brand new in being in this world. So, I didn't find anything funny about it. But they were that was their way of dealing with the tragedy. They were talking, well, I guess he won't see this, or, they were just joking around. And I didn't think it was funny until later, when I realized that's what we do to get over the stress or the tragedy, is we joke around, Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not.
And when we first started, you just handled it. You dealt with the tragedy. But as we progressed, there was debriefings, and you could talk to someone in a mental health
They would offer.
Yeah. But if you were an old timer, you think, oh, you don't need that.
Suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up. But in reality, that was a good addition to our group.
What was your experience the first time you had to save somebody's life over the phone, like to tell them how to do CPR to somebody, or dislodge something from a throat, or?
Well, that's a good feeling. That is a really good feeling. That worked.
was terrifying for me my first time. I was nervous because I wanted to make sure I did it
What
the
was
right
your
way.
experience like, actually?
It's an amazing feeling to think that you were able to verbalize and instruct someone else to do something that would save someone's life. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's very. The first time I had to do it, I was terrified. I'm like, oh my god, I hope I do this right. But you do it so often because you get a lot of those. You get a lot of CPR calls at 911, and walking people through it and making sure that they're counting right or doing things right. And that's why this career was very rewarding because you had a lot of things that you did to help people. I think that's and the difference every day. Your job's different every day, but it was very satisfying and rewarding to be able to help people.
The medical side, there was always a
That's much more rewarding
much more
medical
rewarding.
side.
Yes, 9 out of 10
because people don't call 911 because they're having a good day.
Right.
What was the strangest and bizarrest and funniest?
Kathy.
I mean, I don't know. That's the hard part because some of the ones that are funny are not. They're kind of tragic too. So you don't want to put it too light. I mean, I'm not sure about funny, but I mean, there's been a lot of bizarre calls. We've had like a call where a guy had called one guy we used to have. I'll call him Frank. He was an alcoholic. He was disabled. He used to call us every single night because he was lonely and he didn't have anyone, and he would get drunk every night and call 911. So if we weren't really busy, it depends who answered the phone, we'd chat with him for a while and say, okay, Frank's time, because he'd call like 5 times in a row. It's like, okay, Frank's time to go to bed. It's like, okay, then we got to the point where if we tell you a joke, do you promise to go to bed? So that's what we started doing, because he just became our friend every night. And we were his go-to people. He literally was really lonely, and he had a lot of medical issues and was disabled too. So that was kind of a sad story, but kind of funny because we would all joke around about it. And some nights we were just too busy. Like, Frank, we can't talk tonight. We're too busy. We had too many calls, So, oh, sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. And he was very polite, So he was one of our we had a lot of frequent flyers, as we call them, mental people that would call.
That's some funny stuff. So, how long that Frank?
Oh gosh, years.
Literally
before he passed away. He was in his 60s, I think. I mean, we would ask the medics about him because we'd go out there on some medical calls sometimes. So we'd ask the fire department about him. But all of a sudden he stopped calling, and then we found out that he passed away. But I would say that I remember dealing with him a good 4 or 5 years, almost on a daily basis when I worked. So I don't know. I didn't work 7 days a week, but on the nights I worked.
Sometimes you did.
Well, yeah. But graveyard, he'd usually call graveyard. Yeah.
We had a lot of we had a woman, we nicknamed her the creature, and she would call because she was always.
Did she have all the snakes?
She had snakes. She would see people lurking around her house, prowler calls, and it was all just made up. But we did discover many years later that she had murdered her sister, and she had spent time in prison. And then we were like, well, this all makes sense. She's got some demons.
Yeah. A lot of people have demons out there.
There was one of the largest lawsuits in Washington State history. This is a Seattle dispatch, not anything to do with Thurston County. And handicap, it was a mother and a daughter, were both handicapped, called 911, and they dismissed them as being drunk and a prank call. And they called back repetitively, so somebody was breaking in their house, and a guy broke into their house and raped both of them and beat them up. And it ended up the largest lawsuit in Washington State history, the largest award ever. And I can't remember the name of the secretary. It was a female Secretary of State. Her office didn't reject it. But I remember the 911 operators, they had the transcripts. And it just seemed like they were really, do you remember that case up in Seattle?
I don't
either.
Yeah. It was ugly. Yeah. It made the news, made world news. right? And
I've had so many call me to put it back where I am.
what I find fascinating about this is you guys are a witness to American history in transition as we transitioned from out of having mental health care. And let me clarify, right? When I grew up, we're, same generation ish. Somebody back in the day, they're like, third pike, they're taking their clothes off. White ambulance would pull up. They would throw a white little jacket on them, and off they went to the mental health asylum to, and that was that. Now somebody takes their clothes off and what have you. Uh,
Put
it's
your
like,
clothes back on.
is he doing anything lewd and lascivious? No, he's just taking his clothes off. Has he hit anybody? Done anything? No, but it looks like he's going to start defecating. We might be able to get an officer there in about 2 hours. It's like,
Or at all.
how does that make you feel? I mean, all your years engaging with law enforcement, 911. I mean, because how does, I mean, come on, that must have an emotional impact.
It does.
It honestly, it pisses me off.
Right. I'm actually shocked when I drive through town and I see someone urinating. In my day, they would have been arrested for urinating in public.
Yeah.
And now that's acceptable. So it's hard. But part of that is generational too. You were raised to be proper, and you didn't act out, and you didn't even get drunk in public. That was considered a taboo, where now it's okay.
I mean,
I feel that I sometimes feel that we've lost our way somewhat because
bingo.
because they should still be crimes. Those shouldn't be acceptable.
No.
You shouldn't. We get store owners that call us when they go to work and the next morning, and they've got crap all in front of their door that they have to clean up every day, and they're sick of it. And who do they call? They call 911. Well, unfortunately, we can't do anything because we can tell law enforcement, but law enforcement has gotten to the point where there's not enough cops. There's more stuff that's going on, so they have to prioritize where they go. And the laws that we're passing anymore or not passing are allowing people to do this with no consequences. So it makes it really difficult for law enforcement or for us to even do anything about. And yeah, it pisses me off too, because they should still be crimes. You should not be able to urinate in public or defecate in public or get naked in public, but there's no place to take these people because they've gotten rid of all the facilities, or they've shut them down, or the jails are too full. The jails can't take people that just because you got naked on the street. We've got somebody that just beat the crap out of his wife. We're going to put him here. So there's so many different elements to what's going on now, that needs to change. But I think that until at least Washington wakes up and sees what's going on,
Really?
I mean, it truly just amazes me where we're at.
I like to point something out. In the last 12 years, I've seen this state dramatically change, and not for the better, in 12 years. And at the same point in time, both of you point out there was no facilities. We've downsized this, downsized that. There's no mental health care. But at the same point in time, we never addressed the addiction, homeless addict problem. It's kind of like when I watch the news and they're like, "Oh, the homeless issue." It's a homeless addict issue. It's a homeless addict mental health issue. Okay, they just kind of put the homeless issue. Most of these people, and I've talked to a lot of law enforcement. One cop I talked to, and a lot of times officers, they're just kind of like, we're at homeless camp claims or something like that, and they're like, "Who's this guy?" Because I have a genetic look. I mean, I look like one of the Sopranos. Like, who is this dude? Is he from the East Coast, or is he this, or he's that? And once they start talking to him, I might ask him, like, out of all the years you've done this, have you ever seen like people that truly just lost their job and became homeless? And one officer said maybe 2 out of 100. But we put blinders on in the society, and we send money to other countries, but yet we don't invest in America. And it's not a socialist or a communist thing to have humanity and not allow people to sleep under bridges. It and a lot of people are like, well, they deserve to have repercussions. They made a choice. Well, yeah, they made a choice and they got addicted, and the addiction over rewires the brain, and they're stuck in a cycle. And the way they addressed in Europe, they cut the crime rate by 50% in Europe. Is you've got drugs on you? Great. You're going to prison for 10 years, but we have this amazing rehab program, and you can get out. We can help you find a job and get your life back. What would you like to do? And amazingly, a good vast majority of them choose to do the rehab program, and it's highly successful. But we don't do that. One of the things I'd like to say is that she pointed out we've lost our way. America's lost her way in a lot of aspects. We what I call unseen Americans, but we interview the homeless people, is we pull up to an off ramp, and there's somebody sitting there, they're holding a sign, God bless, anything helps, right? And they're going through rough times, but there's a story behind why they're there. It could be they got addicted to meth and they can't control money, they can't pay rent, they can't pay the mortgage. They got addicted to drugs and destroyed their family. And next thing you know, this guy's 3 states over because he's got warrants in another state, right? For this and that. Or he got let out, he or she, excuse me, got let out of prison, and they got a one-way bus ticket to Seattle, which is a huge problem. I had a gentleman here. He's most likely the son of Nick Nolte. He's been homeless most of his life. And one of the terms he used in the last 20 years, and this was his words, last 20 years, the homeless population has skyrocketed. And crime skyrocketed too. Part of my business, I tested cars that have meth and fentanyl exposure, stolen recovered cars. It was off the rails for 3.5 years. I think that more needs to be done and could be done better. Just getting, like the different counties are buying old hotels, and they pop the homeless in there. And like, okay, that's like expecting a bunch of vampires not to go out and seek blood at night just because they have a place to, hang their hat. It's not going to, it's a Band-Aid. Not more than 2 blocks from here, there's a Band-Aid hotel. I agree with getting them so they're not freezing to death, right? And one of the things, again, I really appreciate you guys coming in and telling your story, and also being straightforward. You have to be able to detach, and you have to, because otherwise you go insane. It happened to me. So, at the same point, you saw America literally change from 74 and then 8, like literally that time period, it dramatically changed. I mean, back in the day, I remember police officers, I had a job we were doing in Tacoma, and the house we had an unattended death there. We were rehabbing the house. I had the Hartford Insurance flying in from back east with a special claims adjuster. This is a big deal when they're flying a guy from back east to come out here. And then the local claims adjuster is going to meet. So I got 2 of those guys there. I've got the client on the way. I left the house on Friday with the crew. Everything's fine. No problem. I'm going to show up Monday morning because I have a bad habit of showing up early for appointments and making sure, everything goes just right. And thank God I did that day, because I got there at 10:30, and there's 2 RVs there and 5 cars. And some bunch of cowboys that broke into the house, homeless addicts. And so I go, okay, I'm gonna get the police on the phone, and they're gonna shag all these people out of here. I got the cops show up, and Tacoma PD shows up, and I have a loud voice, and the officer goes, "Shh." He goes, "We can't force them to leave." And he goes, "We have a special team that can negotiate, asking them of their own free will they leave the property." And I, I don't know. I mean, 1974, 1985. You remember One Atom 12, right? And Dragnet. They go up there, the PR-22s, like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And it's like, "Yeah, whatever, copper." And then they bam, right into the rib. "Get your stuff packed and get out of here now, otherwise you're going to go to jail now." And guess what they would do? They would leave. And I felt helpless. Here comes the adjusters. Here comes, I have the client on the phone. And what tripped off the whole thing is one of the homeless individuals there said he was related to the client through one of her brothers, and he had a right to be there. And you could physically see he broke the patio door. He did about $2,000 damage, broke the frame. Right, he broke into the house. He didn't have a key. Nobody gave him permission to go in there. It's breaking and entering. Okay, I go into the house with the Hartford, so the homeless uh, people are negotiated to the point that we can go in and actually do the inspection with the special claims adjuster from back east and the claims adjuster. And as we're going through, we go into the garage. And I never forget the surreal look of this. I've got Tacoma PD with me, and we go into the garage, and out in the garage are brand new power tools lined up in rows like you have brand new cars at an auto lot. Row after row after row in the garage. And apparently the guy had been taking pictures of it. He stole some of my tools, our construction tools. I had to fight, literally at one point, I've got one of my containers. I'm fighting the guy, or that belongs to me. And I said to the cop, "That's my stuff he's got." He goes, "Do you have receipts or anything you can prove it?" And I'm like, this is crazy town, right? Where are my rights, and where are what's going on here? And after that day, I realized that not only has America lost her way, we have now entered a new era of lunacy. I mean, back in the day, I would agree, in 74, 85, about what, 20 squad cars would have showed up. And the officers have been like, out come the PR-22s and some mace. And I'm like, "You stand over there, right? Don't, say anything or what have you. We'll handle this, keep everybody out of the way." And, half hour later, out would come one or two people in handcuffs, and people would scatter like rats. And no, not at all. Not at all. We have to call and negotiate. We have to negotiate them out.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Beyond.
When I was back east, you retired in 2019, so you're pre-plague, and you're 2010. Okay. I was back east, and I've got a Boston Police Department. Let's just say they're kind of for real. Yeah, they don't play any games. No, there's no games. All East Coast police, I mean, for the most part, when I saw it was totally different. I've got relatives back there that had married into a family, and they're like, "What is going on with all you West Coast?" They had a P word they used, right? So I have to keep this Disney rated. And they're like, "What's this CHOP thing, this autonomous zone?" And they took over police stations. So you guys have been involved with law enforcement, and you had all these years collectively, right? How did that make you feel watching that on TV unfold? That was about 5 years ago.
Disgusted for me. I was totally disgusted by what I saw.
Well, it's almost like you can't believe you're seeing what you're seeing in the United States of America. It's unreal. It's surreal.
You just don't understand it. You don't understand what you're seeing and why it's being allowed. That's what most people I know think. Why are we allowing this stuff?
So that happened in, say, 79, for 6 years ish, or 5 years after you started, right? There'd been an immediate, like,
Arrest.
huge response.
Yes. And you,
multiple agencies. Boom, boom, boom,
yeah,
bang.
and you'll go to jail, and then we'll figure it out.
I mean, even if you look back in history, look at Kent State, you know, they didn't allow protesting or anything. Kids were shot on that campus, you know, we're talking in the 70s. So, you know, it's changed tremendously on what is allowed to be done these days versus, I mean, I'm not saying that was right because people died, but I'm just saying that what's tolerated right now would never have been tolerated during our generation of when we first started working.
Do you think because of litigations against municipalities that it impacted law enforcement and how we treat these situations? Because Kent State would have resulted in wrongful death lawsuits, and now it would, 100%.
Yeah.
But
But don't
what's
you-
your opinion?
But don't you think a lot of legislation, I think cops want to do their job. They're not allowed to do their job anymore. They're not allowed to chase. They're not allowed to pursue a stolen car. They have to either get permission or let it go. There's so much that has come down the pike from,
Well, and you know, CHOP, that's a good example. I mean, the city allowed that. They allowed their streets to be taken over. They allowed police departments, precincts to be taken over instead of bringing the cops in and breaking that down right now.
could have brought in the National Guard
I mean, there
and
was so
shut
many
it all
things.
down, but they didn't.
There was murders in that,
Yeah, two that I remember.
and there was rapes. Okay.
And they had their own security.
Oh yeah, Lord of the Flies. Yeah, I mean, you know, how much more insanity can you have?
But again, you know, and I know I'll get hate for this, but you know, I mean, King County, Seattle make our laws in this state. You know, it's that populated area that allows what's going on in Washington. The percentage of people that, you know, I know on the east of the mountains, or even people in my world, same with Joan, they don't like any of this, you know, but our voices aren't heard enough. So that's part of the problem, especially for the cops.
You feel that common sense has left us,
Oh, 100%.
and it's not about right or left. It's just common sense.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with just what right.
It'd be interesting to ask people on the street, what is common sense?
I know the case. I'll share this with you guys. I was testing a property for drug contamination, and this gal had been in this property since 2019. This was last year. So we're talking 4 years ish, right? Rent free since 2019. They couldn't get her out of the property. She went to the property management office and complained about mold. And she said, per the RCW codes, and I could sue you if you don't get the mold out of my place, and you know, blah blah blah. She has traffic coming up on the street, kind of like a fast food restaurant, going up to the window by her apartment and leaving day and night. And this has been going on for years, and they can't get her out of the building. So I arrive, and I, you know, notified her, hey, I'm, you know, this and that, you know, licensed the Department of Health. I'm here to test for mold, and I'm going to test the property inside for drugs as well. She goes, well, I've got COVID. Nobody's coming in here, and she's the one that requested all this. So I've got a property management guy, a young man from Africa, and here's another surreal thing that happened. Back in the day, you just pick up the phone, 911. Hey, I've got a tenant here. They're not paying the rent. We need access. We need police to keep the peace while we come in, because I don't want the property management kid getting shot, or the property management gal getting, you know, shot or whatever. I mean, I personally, I wouldn't like to get shot either. You know, call me old fashioned. And so she's on the other end of the door. We can hear her calling the police and saying that we're, you know, pounding on the door. And then she, you know, started giving a description of myself and the property management guy. And I just started having fun with it at that point and said, yeah, he looks, make sure you tell him I look like, you know, like a gangster, you know, I was just having some fun with it. And then she said, the other one's real tall and he was from Africa. I go, make sure you mention he's very dark, you know, and she refused us access. They got the property management company, got their lawyers on the phone. So they said, just drill the lockout, go in. And I said, she's got people in there. You drill that lockout, they're going to start shooting through the door. And this is going to end up, you know, like some kind of big legal thing is going to happen out of this. It's not worth getting somebody hurt over trying to get into this place. So she calls the police. We call the police. You know what happened? No police showed up. Nothing happened. So do you feel that society itself is starting to degrade like the fabric of what we consider normal? Because that doesn't sound normal to me. It didn't feel normal to me. I mean,
You mean as far as the police not showing up?
correct.
I think in that situation, though, what you're describing, it depends on the agency and what their policies are. So for our agency, we would have responded. For maybe Tacoma, their policy is we don't respond to civil calls at all. And so it literally depends on what agency's policy and procedures are, whether you respond to. Same with pursuits. I mean, some agencies allow pursuits, others don't. So, before the state legislation just changed it here. But
travel back in time. Let's go back to 1989 for you. Okay. What would have happened?
Oh, we would have sent the cops. Cops would have came and they would have probably busted door in or something.
Somebody would have gone to
I'm
jail.
Sure because that kind of story irritates them. Yeah, she's been here for almost 5 years rent free, right, and she thinks it's a joke. And then so in, say, 1982, what would have happened?
Yeah, somebody would have gone to jail. She would have gone to jail.
Yeah, we were allowed to enforce the law back then.
See, that's the key words I was looking for. Yeah, you said it. And there's a couple of statements you made, that still will stick with me from this interview. Okay, so retirement. Okay, now you're off the calls. What's retirement like now?
It's wonderful. You do realize that you can have a life. You
Okay.
can. You don't have to set a clock or be anywhere. You don't have to work overtime. It's rewarding.
So for me, when I retired, the COVID hit. So for the next couple of years, I was pretty much, I had all these plans to go do things and, travel and stuff, which I couldn't do any of. So the first couple of years kind of sucked. But, now I just celebrated 5 years of retirement in December. It's been good. I think one of my favorite things is not getting up to an alarm, which is totally awesome to me because I love to sleep in. But I can't say that I haven't missed some of the, interaction or just dealing with, that world became such a big part of your life that I think that you still kind of miss some of the action that used to happen. I think being a dispatcher for me, and the reason I promoted up to training supervisor is the first 20 years, you're a call receiver, you're a dispatcher, you're doing good. As you get older in this job, though, it becomes a little more difficult to do all the multitasking. When I started out, I would be at a radio on a Saturday night and I'd go, bring it on, let's go, come on, let's get those pursuits or those foot pursuits and all this stuff. I loved it. I loved the energy. I loved the excitement. 20 years later, not so much. I'd sit down at the radio and I'd be going, okay, nothing tonight, okay? I didn't want that high stress of listening to, cops chasing somebody. For example, the radio traffic's insane. You're just trying to keep up and there's cops on all types of frequencies coming at you. And as you get older, that gets more difficult to handle, I think, so I didn't miss that part. And that's why I promoted into a supervisory position where I was just doing training and working 410s, no more shift work and all that, which is what I did the last pretty much 10, 15 years of my career. So, it's not a career that you see people retire in a lot as a dispatcher. They usually don't, unless you've.
It's definitely a young person.
Yeah, it's not when people would come and apply, say I want to be a dispatcher at the age of 45, 50, because you can't be discriminatory. And I'm thinking to myself, oh no, you don't. The training's intense. Where. Like I said, as you get older, your brain works a little differently and you're not in that younger, exciting place. And the times that we did hire people that were, in their 40s, late 40s or whatever, they usually didn't last because the shift work's very difficult. because you have to change shifts every couple of months. So you work a day shift, then you work a swing shift, then you work a graveyard shift, or you work a power shift. So your body clock's constantly going back and forth. So there's a lot of challenges, when you're first starting out in that career. We're finding it. I'm not so much anymore because I'm not doing the interviewing or hiring, but the challenge they're finding of keeping people anymore is these kids don't want to work in this generation. They don't want to work shift work. They don't care how much money you're paying. I mean, starting out as a 911 dispatcher, you start out at almost $30 an hour with no education, full benefits, everything. It's an awesome, but not everybody can do it, nor does everybody want to do it. So that's the challenge, don't you think?
I do.
Yeah. Like I said, when we retired, we both had been in the supervisory positions for a long time. So it was easier.
And if somebody said, "Oh, will you fill in for me at one of the dispatch consoles?" I'd be like,
Oh, no. Here,
yeah, let me find somebody to do that for you, because
You lose the skills.
you do lose the skills. And your role had changed.
can
You
call
were now
receipt forever.
managing employees. You weren't.
I don't think you can work the radio forever, but you can call receive forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I hear 911 calls now, and I'm like, oh, that could have been handled so much better.
I know.
Could go back, would you do anything different? Would you still do it?
Oh, absolutely. I would.
No, I would have done something different.
I'm curious, what would you do? What would have been different?
I think I could have worked out in the field. I think I could have, yes, I think I could have done that job.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to in Ocean Shores, but I didn't want to.
Didn't? Oh, okay.
I was small, I'd be afraid at night when I'm by myself, out in the calls in the dark.
Yeah, I think I would have done. But
No, I
once you get into it, it is very addicting, and you're making a good living. But yeah, I think I should have gone to school. I should have done things differently.
You'd have been a good detective. That's what if I could have gone straight to
you
being
could
a
have done that,
detective,
yeah.
that's what I would have done without doing all the cop work in the streets. But because I love dispatchers are investigators. We're big time investigators. We solve stuff for the cops all the time because we dig behind the scenes when they don't even know what we're doing. When we're looking at history and we're looking at I remember a call last week, and we can find anything. And so dispatchers are truly very helpful to the officers in finding criminals.
And over the years, we added very few dispatchers compared to the number of officers that were added to their. Yeah. And our work just kept piling up where they spread theirs out. Right. Stuff.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
for having us.
Okay. It was a wonderful conversation. Let's go and wrap it up.
Hey there, podcast lovers. Dive into the world of ideas with the American Enlightenment Podcast. Follow us for mind-expanding episodes that keep you curious and inspired. Visit our website now and join the conversation.